The Ed Sullivan Theater hummed with anticipation as cameras swept across the packed audience. Stephen Colbert strode confidently to his desk, his trademark grin firmly in place as the audience's applause gradually faded. Seated across from him was Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, whose appearance on The Late Show had drawn significant media buzz given the program's typically progressive leanings. Levitt sat poised in a crisp navy suit, her composure striking for someone facing what many anticipated would be a tough interview. The studio crackled with tension. As the youngest press secretary ever, she was stepping into a space that had often critiqued her administration. Colbert leaned forward with the measured timing that had made him a late-night icon. "So, you're the press secretary. I'm curious, what's it like being the adult supervision in this White House?" The audience erupted in laughter and applause at the thinly veiled jab. Cameras caught a fleeting spark in Levitt's eyes as she registered the provocative opening. She adjusted her posture slightly, her expression shifting, not to defensiveness or anger, but to a focused intensity that caught Colbert's attention. What unfolded next transformed what was meant to be a predictable political skirmish into a viral moment that left the studio audience silent and millions of viewers rethinking their assumptions about political discourse in America. Before diving into this extraordinary exchange, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to catch our latest political stories. This confrontation between Stephen Colbert and Caroline Levitt takes an unexpected turn that no one saw coming. Colbert had long been a late-night television fixture. From his early days on The Daily Show to his satirical persona on The Colbert Report and later as host of The Late Show, he had built a reputation on sharp political commentary with a distinctly progressive lens. His interviews with conservative figures often became viral moments as he wielded his wit to expose contradictions or weaknesses in their positions. He represented the liberal media establishment that many conservatives viewed with skepticism. His audience, largely urban and progressive, came expecting political entertainment where conservative guests typically found themselves on the defensive against his blend of humor and pointed questioning. Caroline Levitt presented a striking contrast. Having served as an assistant press secretary in a prior administration before becoming the White House spokesperson, she had already established herself as a formidable communicator. Critics questioned her qualifications, arguing her relative lack of experience made her unfit for the role's demands. Supporters, however, praised her poised handling of the press corps and her ability to articulate complex policy positions under pressure. Raised in a small New Hampshire town in a middle-class family, her background stood in stark contrast to the coastal elite circles that dominated Colbert's audience. The stakes of this appearance went beyond personal reputations. For Colbert, the interview was a chance to score points against an administration his audience largely opposed. His writers had crafted questions to highlight Levitt's inexperience while entertaining his base. For Levitt, the stakes were higher. As the public face of the administration, her performance would shape perceptions not only of her capabilities, but of the White House itself. A weak showing could reinforce narratives about her inadequacy, while a defensive response might fuel viral clips undermining the administration's messaging. Beyond these immediate concerns, the exchange was a microcosm of America's polarized political discourse, Colbert's audience expected aggressive challenges to conservative guests, just as conservative viewers anticipated unfair treatment for Levitt from mainstream media. The interview seemed poised to deepen these divisions rather than bridge them. The Late Show producers had allocated an unusually long segment for the interview, sensing its potential for memorable television. In the control room, directors braced for a contentious exchange that would spark social media engagement. No one, however, had anticipated that this encounter might transcend the usual partisan script. As Colbert's opening jab lingered and the audience's laughter subsided, Levitt prepared to respond to what was clearly the first of many attempts to undermine her credibility. "That's actually a fair question, Stephen," she said, her voice steady and measured, "though I suspect not for the reasons your writers intended." The directness of her response caught Colbert off guard. He had expected either defensiveness or deflection, standard reactions from political guests facing hostile questions. "My writers are innocent," Colbert quipped, regaining his footing. "They're just kids themselves, much like the administration's economic policy team, from what I hear." The audience laughed, and Colbert leaned back, expecting to steer the interview through familiar dynamics. But Levitt didn't follow the script. "You know, I've watched your show for years," she said, surprising the audience. "Even when I've disagreed with your perspective, I've appreciated your intelligence and how you've elevated political comedy beyond simple punchlines. That's why I accepted this invitation, despite knowing it might be challenging territory." Colbert nodded, acknowledging the compliment while preparing his next question. "Speaking of challenging territory, let's talk about your qualifications. Most press secretaries have years of experience before taking the podium. What prepares someone like you to speak for the most powerful office in the world?" The question about her experience was familiar ground, one that had dogged Levitt since her appointment. The audience leaned forward, expecting either a rehearsed talking point or a moment of discomfort. "I was wondering how long it'd take for my qualifications to come up," Levitt said with a slight smile. 3 minutes and 20 seconds, longer than I expected." The audience laughed, but it wasn't at her expense. It was in recognition of her awareness of the situation. "Let me address this directly," she continued. "The average age in Congress is older than the median American. The issues we're facing, technological disruption, climate challenges, economic shifts, will impact younger generations most. My role isn't to claim greater wisdom than those with more experience, but to ensure younger perspectives are represented in rooms where decisions about our future are made. The question isn't whether someone like me belongs at the table, but whether decisions made without voices like mine truly reflect the country's needs." The studio grew quieter, the audience engaging with her response's substance rather than waiting for the next laugh line. Colbert, sensing the shifting dynamic, adjusted his approach. "That's well articulated, but articulation isn't experience. When national security crises arise, do you really believe your perspective is as valuable as someone who's navigated those situations before?" Leavitt nodded. "Experience matters, of course. That's why the president has surrounded himself with advisors who bring expertise in military, diplomatic, and intelligence matters. My job isn't to replace their knowledge, but to communicate their expertise effectively while ensuring younger perspectives inform policy. But Stephen, since we're on experience, What life experiences prepared you to shape political discourse for millions of Americans each night? You studied philosophy and theater, performed improv comedy, then entered television. That's not a traditional path to political influence either. The audience murmured at the unexpected role reversal. Levitt questioning Colbert's qualifications rather than defending her own. It wasn't an attack, but a genuine question, highlighting the arbitrary scrutiny some non-traditional backgrounds face. Colbert, to his credit, recognized the pivot. "Touché," he said. "I suppose I've been influencing opinions without a political science degree for years, but I'm not speaking for the president." Levitt nodded. "You're right. You're speaking to millions of Americans 4 nights a week, shaping their understanding of complex issues through comedy and interviews. I'd argue that carries its own responsibility." The exchange had moved beyond the expected script into something more substantive. Recognizing that gotcha questions weren't yielding the usual results, Colbert shifted to policy. "Let's talk climate policy. Your administration has rolled back environmental regulations, while young Americans overwhelmingly support stronger climate action. How do you square representing a younger generation while advancing policies many in that generation oppose?" Levitt replied, "That's a better question than focusing on my background. The administration's approach emphasizes technological innovation and market-based solutions over regulations that may hinder economic growth. We believe next-generation nuclear, carbon capture, and renewables offer sustainable long-term solutions. Many young Americans, even those who disagree, share the desire for effective environmental stewardship. We differ on methods, not goals. That's healthy democratic debate." The audience, expecting political theater, found themselves listening to a substantive policy discussion. Colbert, sensing the interview's evolution, tried to regain control with humor. "Your ability to stay on message is impressive. I'm starting to wonder if you're a well-preserved political operative." The audience laughed, but the dynamic had shifted. What began as an attempt to highlight Levitt's inexperience had showcased her ability to engage substantively while challenging Colbert's premises. Colbert, recognizing policy debates weren't delivering the viral moments his show thrived on, shifted to personal territory. "Let's talk about working for this president. We've heard reports of staff turnover and challenging workplace dynamics. Off the record, blink twice if you need rescuing." The audience laughed as Colbert pantomimed a covert blink, expecting discomfort. Instead, Levitt's response transformed the interview. "You know, Stephen," she began, her tone shifting, "before coming here, I watched your interview with President Obama. You asked thoughtful questions about the weight of decision-making, balancing public service with family life, and how the office changes a person. They were insightful, treating public service as a serious calling rather than fodder for punchlines. They showed respect for the office while maintaining your perspective and humor." Colbert nodded, recognizing the reference. "I understand my boss isn't your preferred president," Levitt continued. "I respect that. It's what makes democracy work. But I've noticed something that concerns me, not as a Republican or press secretary, but as an American who cares about our ability to function as a society across differences." The studio grew remarkably quiet, sensing something authentic unfolding. We've lost the ability to disagree about policies while recognizing that people across the spectrum are generally trying to make the country better, according to their understanding of better. Instead, we assign the worst motives to those we disagree with, treating differences as moral failings rather than good faith disagreements about complex issues. Colbert started to interject with a joke, but Levitt's earnest expression gave him pause. My generation hasn't seen functional politics, she continued. We've grown up with gridlock, shutdowns, and polarization. The adults in the room haven't shown us how to disagree productively or govern collectively across differences. Your platform gives you a unique opportunity, Stephen. You can keep treating half the country as malevolent or foolish for their views, which makes for easy applause but deepens divisions. Or you can use your communication gifts to help Americans see our shared humanity, even while keeping your progressive perspective. The audience sat in silence, not the awkward silence of a failed joke, but the weighted silence of unexpected authenticity in a space defined by performative conflict. I came tonight knowing I'd likely be the punchline to numerous jokes, Levitt said. I came anyway because I believe we need to see each other as fellow Americans, not just political opponents. My generation's future depends on rediscovering that capacity. She smiled slightly. So yes, you can keep asking questions designed to make me look foolish. I'll answer them. But I think your audience deserves more than watching you try to embarrass a guest who came into what we both know is somewhat hostile territory to show that conversation across differences is still possible. The studio remained silent as her words lingered. Cameras caught audience members exchanging glances, processing the departure from political combat. Colbert, caught between his role as satirical host and the authentic challenge Levitt presented, set aside his note cards. That's a fair point, he said, his tone shifting to genuine engagement, and probably something all of us in this business should reflect on. So let's try something different. What's one thing you wish more Americans on my side of the spectrum understood about your administration's goals? The question marked a remarkable pivot, inviting dialogue across differences rather than seeking viral moments at Levitt's expense. The audience, initially primed for political bloodsport, witnessed something more compelling. Two people with deep differences engaging substantively. Levitt nodded appreciatively. I wish more Americans understood that, despite policy disagreements, this administration genuinely wants to create economic opportunity for all communities, strengthen innovation, and leave the country more prosperous and secure. We have different methods than progressive approaches, but the goals of expanding opportunity aren't so different. Similarly, I acknowledge that despite my disagreements with progressive policies, they come from a genuine desire for a more equitable society. We can disagree about methods while recognizing each other's sincerity. What began as an attempted takedown had become something neither the audience nor viewers expected. A moment of authentic connection across political divides, demonstrating an alternative to polarized discourse. As the segment ended and Colbert thanked Levitt, the audience's applause carried a different tone, not partisan approval, but recognition of something authentic that transcended political combat, something many Americans craved but rarely saw in media. Clips of the exchange spread rapidly across social media, What made it compelling wasn't the usual partisan combat that drove engagement, but its opposite, the authentic conversation that emerged when Levitt challenged the premise of political entertainment at her expense. Major outlets covered the story with headlines reflecting its unexpected nature. Late night surprise. Colbert-Levitt exchange transcends partisan combat. Washington Post. Press secretary flips script on late night veteran. New York Times. From confrontation to conversation, how Levitt changed the tone on Colbert. Politico. Inside the studio, the audience's reaction mirrored the broader response. As cameras stopped rolling, several attendees approached Levitt to express appreciation, not for her politics, but for her willingness to engage authentically in a challenging environment. Many posted online about respecting someone they disagreed with politically. Media analysts dissected the exchange on morning shows. On CNN, a commentator noted, "What made this moment significant wasn't Levitt's defensive policies. It was her ability to step outside the script and challenge the framework of political entertainment itself." On Fox News, analysts praised her composure and redirection. She showed conservative voices can engage in mainstream media without becoming defensive or abandoning principles, one said. The exchange sparked broader conversations about political media's role in polarization. An Atlantic essay, Entertainment versus Engagement. What the Colbert-Levitt moment reveals, argued, our political entertainment rewards performative conflict over substantive engagement. Both Colbert and Levitt showed the possibility of something more constructive when they stepped outside their roles. Within political circles, Democratic strategists privately acknowledged Levitt's effective communication, with one telling Politico, "She connected with viewers who don't share her politics by appealing to shared concerns about democracy. That's something all communicators should study." For the administration, the interview was an unexpected victory. Press coverage shifted from Levitt's background to her substantive communication skills and ability to navigate tough media environments. Several cabinet secretaries sought her guidance for their own appearances, recognizing her approach's effectiveness. Colbert addressed the interview on his next show, showing self-reflection. "Last night, something unusual happened," he told his audience. "A guest challenged me to consider whether our political entertainment, including this show, contributes to divisions that make governance harder. It's worth thinking about, even while keeping our perspective and humor. I've built a career on satire, and I believe humor is essential for processing political reality. But there's a line between satire that speaks truth and content that reinforces tribal identities. I'm still figuring out where that line is. We all are." The impact extended beyond immediate coverage. Universities incorporated the exchange into media studies and political communication courses. A University of Illinois professor noted, "This interaction will be studied as a moment when political combat was interrupted by an authentic challenge to its premises. Both participants showed the possibility of more constructive discourse." For Levitt, the interview transformed public perception. While policy disagreements persisted, critics now engaged her positions substantively rather than dismissing her based on background. Job offers from media, consulting, and academic institutions poured in, though she remained committed to her role. The exchange prompted self-reflection among media figures about their role in polarization. Several late-night hosts and commentators privately contacted Levitt to acknowledge her challenge's legitimacy, with some adjusting their approaches to include more substantive engagement with diverse perspectives. Months later, Levitt and Colbert appeared together at a Columbia Journalism School media ethics conference, discussing how political entertainment could maintain its critical function and humor while fostering constructive discourse. Their joint appearance, unthinkable before their viral exchange, underscored the possibility of engagement across differences that the original interview had revealed. The story of Stephen Colbert's attempted jab at Caroline Levitt and her response that silenced the audience transcended the immediate political moment. It offered a template for how Americans might engage across deep divides, not by abandoning principles, but by recognizing the humanity and good faith of those they disagree with. In a nation marked by political tribalism, the exchange showed that authentic engagement remains possible when participants step outside the performative roles assigned by a media ecosystem that rewards conflict over understanding. Respectful dialogue could ease polarization,